Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Women in Tech. Today, I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Jenn Bergstrom. Jenn is the Vice President of Cloud and Data Solutions at Parsons. She is an AWS Ambassador, a dedicated community builder, and she is a Golden Jacket holder, which is a recognition awarded by AWS to those who have successfully earned all of AWS certifications. I'm excited to have you here, Jenn, and to hear your story. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Nora. I'm excited to be here. It's an honor.
Thank you. So, Jen, you have accomplished a lot, like from engineering to leadership in cloud and data. So, could you please share with us how your journey started and what path led you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have about 20 years of experience in the industry. I started out with a degree in electrical engineering, but really it began before that. When I was a really young kid, I had an older sister. I was the baby in my family. Still have an older sister. But she used to love teaching me all of her math classes as she was taking them. And she was 3 grades ahead of me in school. Having her teaching me her math as she was learning it seeded me with an excitement and an interest in the mathematics and in STEM in general. And I've carried that over throughout my entire career. When I went to undergraduate, I went into electrical engineering, did a fully hardware senior design project that I really did not enjoy, and decided I was going to go into software engineering as a result. So thankfully, the degree also prepared me well for software engineering. We did coding as part of that training. So got a job out of graduation with a company called Lockheed Martin, a very large defense contractor company here in the United States, and spent 10 years there moving around in job responsibilities from software engineer to software team lead to system engineer and those types of roles, but all very technically focused, very much software focused. When my husband and I had our second kiddo, we decided mutually that it would be best if one of us stayed home with the kids to raise them while they were young, and it made the most sense at the time for that to be me. So I happily stepped out of industry entirely for about 6 years to be home with my kids while they were tiny. And the day that my youngest went to her first full day of school was the day that I went to work again after dropping her off. So I dropped her off at school for her first day, drove to the office, picked up my badge, and started my in-dog process. Made for an interesting transition for the family as a whole, but was also really good. Came back into the industry as a software engineer and working with Java, enterprise level Java and databases for a small company called Solidigm Solutions. That company was purchased by a larger company called Polaris Alpha, which 6 months later was then purchased by my current company, Parsons. So I went from 100 employees to 2,300 employees to about 14,000 employees in the
Oh my
span of
God.
6 months, which was quite a transition.
Yeah.
While I've been employed by that company, I've moved through multiple different job responsibilities. Like I said, I started as a software engineer, individual contributor again when I came back in, but then moved relatively quickly back into team lead type of roles, somewhat of the functional manager side of things, managing the careers, managing the tasking and the reporting for my teams. Did a little stint as a project engineer as well, or a project manager, and realized I don't really enjoy that very much. And so stepped back out of that and into the technical path and had the opportunity to be a chief technology officer for one of our sectors for a period of time, which I absolutely loved. And then the opportunity that I'm currently in came up, and that was driving the cloud strategy for our federal half of our company. So over the span of roughly 5 years with this company, I moved from being a lead software engineer into the VP level position that I'm in now.
That is truly impressive. Jen, here I would like to stop at the point where you mentioned that you had to step out of the industry for almost 6 years. Because I truly find it inspiring, especially for people who had to take time off, whether for family or for different reasons, and now are considering of returning back to the market. So how was your transition? Especially nowadays, even a few months, like taking time off work would raise concerns during interviews. So how was it for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was rough getting back into the industry. I failed more than a few interviews. I was able to get the interviews by tailoring my resume so that the 6 year gap wasn't quite as evident. But then as soon as I started talking with the interviewers, it became very clear very quickly that I was rusty. So it was a combination of serendipity and very aggressive reskilling for myself while I was in that interviewing process to get to where I could successfully captivate a company enough for them to want to hire me again as a software engineer. A couple things to note, my skills were rusty, but I had been learning throughout the whole process of time that I was home with the kids. I didn't stymie myself. I was still intellectually challenged. It just wasn't focused on technology. It was focused on other things like musical instruments and crafting and things that the kids were interested, like human physiology and reptile physiology and various other interesting things like that. So when I was getting back into the industry, the thing that really helped me and that finally captivated the company that did hire me was my ability to reframe the things that I learned into transferable skills. So how did managing two very active young kids, toddlers who both walked very early, how did that set me up well to be able to interface in the professional work environment? And the reality is, dealing with engineers is not that far off from dealing with toddlers in a lot of cases, right? So if you can manage them, you can convince them, persuade them to do what you want them to do. You can do that with engineers too, right? So there's transferable skills there. One thing, I didn't hide my gap other than I didn't explicitly highlight it on my resume.
Yeah.
But when people asked me about it, I told them exactly what I did and why I did it. And I'm not ashamed of the fact that I took the time out. I'm actually very proud of that fact because it was really good for my kids. It was good for the family. It was good for me as a mother and as a person. And I think it makes me a better employee now. And, my company seems to agree since I'm still here 10 years later.
That is really inspiring, Jen. Jen, I would like also to ask you about like the experiences, choices, and challenges that you feel that most influenced your success.
Yeah, absolutely. So, probably my biggest career challenge that I've ever faced, other than coming back in after that gap, was making the transition from a pure technical employee to a manager or project lead type of employee. The way that you count your value and what you bring to the table for your company changes completely when you move from being an individual contributor or even a technical team lead to a project manager, to the more removed management side of things. And figuring out how to count that value, one for myself, but then how to present that value to my managers and to the rest of the team was hard. That was a big change for me. Um, the other piece that I had to really adjust to there that was challenging was the realization that the technical execution for our projects was no longer in my hands. It was in the hands of my team, and my job as the manager was to make sure that the team could do everything that they needed to do and that we committed to what we needed to and then delivered on those commitments. I couldn't easily jump in and do the work myself like you do when you're a, technical team lead anymore. I had to trust my teams to do it.
I see. Also, like Jill, like being a vice president of a big company, now you are working with multiple teams across different practices, data, cloud, machine learning. So, what is your approach of dealing with different personalities? And what would you say is your secret of being a successful leader?
So there's, I think, I'll say three primary secrets that I use in my day to day. One of them is the way that I approach work in general, which is keeping what I call a perspective of realistic optimism. So expecting that things are going to work out, but looking for the places that could cause the friction to happen or cause things to not work out so that we can proactively mitigate those. So, don't get down in the weeds, down in the dumps about things, but also know what challenges are going to be and have a plan in place for how you're going to deal with them when they come up because realistically they do happen, but optimistically we're going to get there, we're going to accomplish what we need to do. So that's one. The second one is really understanding that you have to persuade people in my type of a role. It's not about having authority. Yes, I have VP in my title, but I don't have a huge team. I don't have a lot of people that I can issue commands to. And frankly, as a leader of a team, if I'm commanding, I'm not leading effectively. So using the power of persuasion, figuring out how to frame things so that people are interested in doing what I need them to do and see the value in it for them. That's a really important skill. And then the third skill really is trusting myself and understanding that I am here for a reason, that I was put into this role because I earned it, not because I'm a woman or any other possible reason, but because I truly earned it. And having that trust gives you a position where you can really step forward in confidence and know that what you're doing is what the company wants you to be doing and what you're adding value by doing.
Yeah, and communication-wise, do you have a specific format of communicating with employees across all of those practices?
So my preferred communications is similar to what we're doing today, which is Teams. I love having the video on. That said, when I'm communicating with other teams, especially when I'm trying to influence them or persuade them to do what I need them to do, it's not about what I prefer, it's about what they prefer. Meeting them where they are and getting their comfort levels as high as possible helps me be more successful at persuading them. So some of my teams, some of the people I'll talk with on Slack, some of them I'll talk with in Teams chat, some of them are pretty much exclusively email, and others will hop onto a Teams call like this and let us have a conversation that way. And there are very few that really prefer phone calls, which for me is the biggest challenge of all because that is my least favorite method of communication.
Cool. Actually, I find your approach is like very thoughtful and it shows emotional intelligence. Because unfortunately, like now in many companies, communication follows a fixed template, like driven by like management preferences, which eventually becomes like the culture. And if someone does not naturally align with that, they are considered like not fitting, regardless of the value like they or the talent they bring to the table. So I highly like your approach, and I think it's a good reminder that people respond better when we meet them where they are in terms of how we communicate with them.
I think how much potential those companies that enforce a specific way of communicating miss out on.
Yeah,
My entire team of direct reports, every one of us is neurodivergent, and oftentimes the communication ways that we have to use look weird to neurotypical individuals, but it's what works for the team. It's what works for the individuals that I've built this team from.
cool. Yeah, that requires selflessness to be able to. It's not what about you want. It's about what would make the team successful. That is great, Jen. And also, also in this position as a vice president, it means like you are most of the time operating under a very high pressure. So, what was your experience been like with those situations, and how do you manage to keep delivering successfully under all of that pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. So remember that I mentioned earlier realistic optimism.
Yeah,
That's a big way, a big piece of the way that I approach everything, and that helps me deal with the pressure. The other piece that really helps me deal with pressure is ruthless prioritization of the work that I do. There are constant demands on my time, just like there are for, technical employees. That the constant demand doesn't change. The nature of the demands do, but the fact that those demands are incoming all the time does. Where I actually have luxury in the role that I'm in now compared to when I was a technical person is that it's easier for me to say, this doesn't align with my primary business objectives, so I'm going to deprioritize it.
okay, I
I
see.
couldn't say that as effectively as a technical engineer, but I can do that now. And, the trick is when you do deprioritize something, if somebody's coming and asking you for it, you have to have an empathetic deprioritization. So you can't just say, I'm not going to do that because it doesn't matter. You have to say, these are my higher priority items right now. I understand that you need this. We will get to it as quickly as we can because I know that it matters for you.
Yeah.
And, but then at the same time, be able to say, I can't do that right now, though. It's got to wait. Um, that's been an interesting thing to learn. I'm really bad at saying no naturally, so that's something I've had to work very hard at getting better at. And that ruthless prioritization, because it's so necessary to keep my team from being overwhelmed, has been a skill that I've really fought hard to learn.
Yeah. And also, another question around being a vice president with women in tech. with a percentage of less than 18% and the role of vice president. So, what challenges did you face in your journey to leadership and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, that is a fun question, isn't it? There's so many reasons why there's so few of us that make it to this level, but one of the biggest challenges that I've faced and that I've had to counter in order to get to where I am is just self-trust, believing that I'm here because I earned it. And this may not be politically correct to say, I don't know, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's my reality. So my experience was that partially because of some of the initiatives that were put in place to try to encourage more women to get into leadership roles,
Yeah.
there's a perception, an incorrect perception among some other individuals within leadership roles that women were promoted because they were women, not because of their capabilities. And that's an unfortunate thing because more often than not, still, women are promoted based on proven performance, whereas men are oftentimes promoted based on potential.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
we already have to prove our
Yeah.
capabilities in order to get into these types of roles, right? Um, Biggest thing for that is, again, knowing that I earned it, that I've worked hard to get where I am, and knowing what I've worked to learn, the skills that I've specifically focused and developed and deliberately worked on, reminding myself of that is really important. And I do that on a regular basis. I have kind of my own little internal brag book that I go and look at when I'm having a rough day because it reminds me of everything that I've done. But the other piece is there are amazing people out there that we work with. I have some of the best coworkers that I've ever had the privilege of working with at my company right now. It's one of the many reasons that I've been here for 10 years, but finding champions and advocates within your workforce, especially as a woman who is moving up the chain, is
Yeah.
essential.
True.
They're the ones that are out there saying, yes, she's qualified. Yes, here's her qualifications. Yes, here's why she's ready for that type of a role. And those types of champions and advocates can make a huge difference in your ability to move up within the industry and within your company and the roles that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. Like, I like the point you mentioned that women are promoted for proven performance, while men are promoted for potentials. And I highly agree with you about like self promotion is very important for us. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that your work will speak for itself, but you have to give it the microphone, the stage, and the audience, or else
yeah,
nobody's going to hear it.
yeah, I agree. And being a mother of two daughters, so how do you manage to balance your responsibilities and still being able to achieve your goals?
That's always a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah,
So a lot of people talk about work-life balance. I don't think of it so much as balance as I do getting back to the ruthless prioritization of what I'm doing. And what I mean by that is when I'm home with my kids and with my family, my focus is my kids and my family. And I try very, very hard to make that true every time that I'm with them. So they're getting my attention, they're getting my focus, they're getting that dedication. And the same thing applies for the most part when I'm at work. My kids actually kind of laugh at me because they'll send me a text during the day and I'll respond to it 2 hours later when I finally get around to checking my text messages. So it's a ruthless prioritization and balance.
okay.
One of the things that I think was a huge benefit of me being able to be home with the kids for the first few years of their life is that they've seen me in the role of a mother and entirely focused on them and making sure their needs are met. But then now they're also seeing me in the role of a professional and as an employee and as a woman who's out there making a difference in our industry. And getting both of those views of the same person, I think, has really opened their eyes to their potential to be anything that they want to be as well. It's one thing to tell somebody you can do anything you want. It's a whole nother thing when they can see you
A role
doing
model.
that.
Yeah, a real
Yeah.
role model in front of them. As like I think that would help change the equation. As personally, I think like the low percentage of women in STEM is not because like men are better at math or problem solving. It is more so because we have too few like role models in the field. And when we do have them, they are often overlooked or not spotlighted the way they should. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. And, it's an interesting thing. I volunteered in my kids' classrooms a lot when they were younger, especially elementary school. And my school was a really good one, or their school was a really good one. It had a club for math and a club for science that kids were invited to join from kindergarten all the way through to fifth grade, and then they went on to middle school. But the interesting thing for me was the math club in particular, from kindergarten through third grade, was roughly 50-50 boys and girls that
Yeah.
were signing up for it and participating in it. Fourth grade, that changed.
Okay.
And all of a sudden in fourth grade, it was far fewer girls that were signing up for math club and STEM. And it wasn't that there was any difference in who was teaching it. It was the same teacher that did the club for all of the grades. But in fourth grade, what I saw happening in the classroom was that kids started to reinforce to each other the gender stereotypes. So my younger daughter, stayed in the math club all the way through
Mhm.
elementary school because she really enjoyed it. But she used to get teased by the girls in her class for going to math club and for finding it really exciting and fun. And that teasing didn't start until fourth grade. But fourth and fifth grade, they teased very aggressively. And it was really interesting to see that happening. It was a self-regulation of the girls trying to push girls out. Now, the other interesting thing with that is now that they're in high school, she's going to be a senior this year. She starts next week back in her senior year in high school. Those same girls that were teasing her, some of them now are coming to her and asking her to tutor them and help them get better at math. So it's an interesting little switch that's been happening because she stuck with it and stayed. So, there's a lot of social misconceptions about the skills of women and men in the STEM and technical fields. And I agree 100% with you. Women are every bit as capable as men to do the math and STEM fields. There is nothing about the way that our brains work that constrains that ability.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of social perception that does still constrain it. And having the good examples, being able to see people out there doing it and finding it really fun and satisfying as a career, that's really important.
Yeah, for that reason, I'm truly, truly, I mean it. I'm so excited to have you on this interview to show you because you are such a successful role model and you managed kind of to balance both your personal life, your family, and you are still such a successful woman at work.
I also do have to give a shout out to my amazing husband. If he wasn't home managing the family and the household to allow me to run forward in my career like I have been, I wouldn't have been able to do it. It takes a family, it takes a community,
Sure,
and
sure.
he's actually the home parent right now. So he's home full time, focused on keeping the family running smooth, and it's amazing having that available. It lets me step forward in confidence and travel the way that I need to for my role.
Yeah, the right partner definitely makes the difference. Yeah. And so working in a male-dominant environment in management position, what challenges did you face and how did you overcome them?
Oh, so many challenges. Um, I guess the single biggest thing is we're constantly getting pressure to change the way that we behave so that we align more with the perception of what a strong leader looks like. And that perception is based on the dominant folks in the industry, which is more men than women. But the reality is, the best way that you can lead and the most effective you can be as a leader is if you stay true to yourself. And if you keep who you are and let your strengths reflect in the way that you lead, that makes a huge difference. You don't have to be a man to excel in this environment, in a male-dominated environment. I'm saying that now, as though I've known that for a long time, but it took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah.
And honestly, that first 10 years that I had with Lockheed Martin, I was trying very hard to be a man in the environment and to fit in.
And yeah,
And
like
it
you are pushed in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I came back, and thankfully I came back to an amazing company after I'd taken my time home with the kids. And I had one particular mentor who was a woman leader. She was a director in the company, and she challenged me on what I was doing and said, "Jen, is that doesn't seem like that's naturally you. That's not the way that you behave when I see you. Why are you doing that?" And her challenging me helped me kind of take that step back and realize, oh, hold up. Why am I doing that? Why do I feel like I need to do that? And as soon as I stopped doing it, that was about 5 years ago that it really sunk in that I don't need to do that anymore. And that's when my career here really started taking off.
Cool. Yeah.
So, the interesting thing, we do still tend to be overlooked when there are more men in the room. And
Yeah.
I think part of that is because we tend to take a step back and kind of let the noise happen. Um, and that's a challenging thing. That is something that I had to overcome, was figuring out how I could be true to myself, but at the same time speak up and represent and be more vocal.
Yeah.
And, that's something that everybody kind of has to figure out how to do for themselves. I think, your style is different from my style, is different from anybody else's style. And that's part of the beauty of it, but it's also part of the challenge of it.
Yeah, true. Like I relate to your experience because I have been explicitly asked to change my voice tune. I'm soft spoken to sound like more convincing to others. I thought like, why do I need to change my voice or like my personality? Like, but it sounded like, as you mentioned, like because it's like it's dominated by men, so uh, that is like the stereotype like people received of how to be a powerful manager by having like loud speaking loudly and yeah, but there is
Yeah.
another approach here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I mean, you make a big point, right? Men tend to be loud, they tend to want to be heard, and they tend to expect us to operate the same way. But where I've had the most success at work is when I'm not the loudest voice in the room, but
Yeah.
I'm the one that gets the coalition. I'm the one that builds the team. I'm the one that draws people to what I want to get done. So, I've mentioned the power of persuasion several times. Persuasion is not done by yelling. You don't convince anybody by yelling at them or by speaking over the top of them. You convince them, you persuade them by resonating with them and by finding the things that draw them to what you need them to do. And that's a skill that women tend to be really good at because we have to do it. I talked earlier about, wrangling two toddlers, right?
Yeah.
You can't order toddlers to do anything and expect them to necessarily do it without throwing a tantrum. But if you can convince them that, hey, here's your options, and this one is the one that you want to choose without them realizing that you're doing that, they'll do anything you want them to do. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
So similar skills, similar capability. And it's not about being dishonest. It's about finding the commonalities and the things that draw you together.
Yeah. It requires a lot of emotional intelligence. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you so much, Jen, for sharing your inspiring story. I truly had the pleasure of chatting with you, and I look forward to seeing you in person again at reInvent.
Absolutely. And thank you, Nora. I am honored by the invitation. Hopefully, our conversation today helps somebody else or somebody's else. That would be amazing. And yeah, we'll definitely connect at reInvent and at future ambassador events as well, hopefully.
Thank you. So, to our audience, like changing the society starts with the small changes we make in ourselves. And I believe like sharing those inspiring stories of successful, bold, and strong women is a step forward in changing the equation. Thank you for listening and see you in the future in another episode with another successful woman in tech. Thank you so much. Salam. Thank you, Jen.